Will Walden's with us. He was the former press secretary to Boris Johnson, has worked with him very closely for a number of years. Hi, good morning. Were you expecting this morning?
Hello, Kay. I've said to you on many occasions in recent months, and I wrote in the Times overnight, that Boris doesn't do change, he doesn't do apology, and he pretty much doesn't do resignation unless it benefits him. And I was getting very worried this morning that he was actually not only trashing his legacy, but trashing the very tenets of democracy. So all I can say to you this morning, Kay, is thank God. You know, he has finally done the right thing, but what a farce. To be dragged kicking and screaming like he is an embarrassment. And what I hope now, I mean, here's the situation, right? Is he going to reappoint the 57 ministers and trade envoys and PPSs as he goes on for the next? This is all totally unnecessary. The writing was on the wall, and I presume he is going to have to reappoint people to cabinet and not give new jobs to people, and that would be the right thing to do. And I do hope when we see the Prime Minister later that instead of the usual guff, because that's what it's become. I'm sorry to say, you know, as an old friend, he knows my views on it all. It has become that. Let's not have all the usual pandering, Boris. Let's have a serious, sober statement that the right conclusion has been reached, that he can salvage some of the legacy around Brexit and around Ukraine and around COVID vaccine. Yes, let's give him that, right? But let's also have an orderly transition. And that means making sure that we don't have useless, pointless legislation on the agenda, that they only concentrate on the things that really matter, the stuff like solving the current cost of living crisis, and that we have a sober handover. What we saw last night was beyond farce, you know, dipping hands in blood, the revenge stuff on Michael Gove, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic, I'm sorry to say. And he has now finally seen that the writing is not on the wall. But it has taken the resignation of his education secretary, who must be the shortest serving cabinet minister in history, and his new chancellor telling him the game is up. And I think he's come dangerously close to reaching a point where he would trash his entire legacy. He has an opportunity today, now having resigned, to do the right thing in terms of this speech and the right thing over the next 6 to 12 weeks. And I hope he takes that opportunity, and I hope he does it properly, because that is what will define him going forward.
OK, and as far as what's going on behind us in number 10 at the moment, two questions. What will be happening? Who'll be surrounding him? And how will he be feeling?
Well, I suspect he'll be feeling utterly miserable. But it's self-inflicted. From the very beginning, this has been self-inflicted. He's made missteps all along in the handling of these incidents, and ultimately it has cost him. And the talk yesterday of, I carry on, I have a mandate, you know, he doesn't have a mandate. He certainly doesn't have a mandate now, but he doesn't anyway. He's lost. And Beth made a little accidental misstep earlier where she referred to two-term president and then corrected himself. And that's the problem. I think Boris has seen this as a presidency. He has taken his example from the mayoralty with no opposition and come into number 10 with the same presidential plan. And that has cost him. So what will be going on now is that there'll be, you know, presumably, I mean, it could be that, you know, he'll feel very disappointed, but actually prime ministers, when they make the decision, there's a huge weight immediately comes off their shoulders. And it could be that they're all sitting around, you know, probably watching us, throwing things at me, just saying, oh, well, you know, it was great, and talking about their greatest hits. I hope that they're somberly and soberly preparing for the next 12 weeks, writing a decent, principled resignation speech. And he should be given credit for, you know, for a lot of stuff that's happened. But if you're going to be prime minister, it's a massively difficult job, and you've got to get much of it right. And when you get it wrong, you've got to be brave enough to front up and say that. And I hope that he does some of that today. And I hope that, you know, that when we hear the speech and when we hear the plan for the next 12 weeks, we have a somber assessment of the grave problems that face this country, the grave problems that face Europe and the world with everything that's going on in Ukraine and the like, and that we have 12 weeks of calm where the Prime Minister can salvage some of this legacy, and we can have an orderly transition to a new Prime Minister and a new government.
Is that within him? Can he do that?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Can he behave himself?
Yes, he can. you know, I mean, it sounds like he's still kicking and screaming and didn't want to go, but they've persuaded him that, and I'm glad they have, and I hope that people like Gito Harry and David Canzini are close to him, have stood up to him this morning and said, you know, I hope that's what's happened, that it's over, and they now help him through this next period. And he is absolutely capable of that. You know, I've said to you many times, Kay, he is not a bad man, right? But it has unraveled and it is over, and he needs to think soberly about the country and, yes, about his legacy. And actually his legacy will be vastly improved if he deals with the next 6 to 12 weeks correctly. It is the next test in Boris Johnson's extraordinary career, and I hope he reflects on that in the next few hours and does the right thing.
How do you think he'll be remembered?
Well, I think if he was still here next Tuesday and hadn't done what he'd done this morning and they booted him out, I think he'd be remembered for only this, frankly. I think he's just about been able to pull it back. And I think the interesting thing is, if he was booted out next week as opposed to now and going as he has, I suspect they wouldn't have allowed him to continue as Prime Minister. We would have had an interim Prime Minister, and that would have been an extraordinary event. So I think he will be remembered as a great communicator. The man that absolutely delivered Brexit and got Brexit done. I think history tends to judge prime ministers better, with the benefit of hindsight. And he's done the right things around Ukraine. But I think he will also remember somebody that fundamentally didn't listen. And that became somewhat presidential. And I think that's the reason that he's in the pickle and has had to resign. There's great things ahead, I'm sure, for Boris Johnson. He has great things to offer. I just hope that he can offer them in a sober, sensible and pragmatic way. And look, he's the greatest campaigner of his generation. And he'll always be able to say, my party got a 80-seat majority and a massive mandate. Unfortunately, I suspect that not much of that will be remembered now because of the events of the last week.